Protocol dictates fear, but humans are famously bad at following instructions. The zenith spire was vibrating, not metaphorically, though the tension in the room was thick enough to choke a gargoyle, but literally humming with the sub-bass of a diplomat's throat singing from 3 sectors over. Caden Voss swirled the amber liquid in his glass, leaning against a pillar of faux marble that cost more than his entire education. He was bored. Not just regular bored, but that special soul-crushing ennui that only comes from being the lowest-ranking human liaison at a galactic gala where the primary form of entertainment was watching sentient gas clouds argue about trade tariffs. I mean, honestly, you can only watch a crustacean ambassador molt so many times before it loses its novelty. Caden sighed, adjusting the collar of his dress uniform. It scratched. He scanned the room looking for an exit or at least a fresh bottle of whatever this synthesized whiskey was, and that was when the crowd parted. It didn't part like a wave. It parted like prey scattering before a shark. She stood in the center of a 10-meter dead zone, Isolde. To the rest of the room, she was a towering nightmare of obsidian chit skin and shifting, void-touch geometry, draped in a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight and warnings. Her eyes were pools of absolute zero, and her presence dropped the ambient temperature of the room by 10 degrees. The dignitaries trembled, clutching their drinks, their survival instincts screaming at them to freeze or flee. But Caden? Caden just squinted. He didn't see the Empress of the Void Weavers, the destroyer of the Calaxian fleet. He saw someone standing awkwardly by the buffet table, shoulders hunched in a way that screamed social anxiety. It was that peculiar, baffling Terran empathy kicking in, the human instinct to look at something terrifying and decide it just needs a hot beverage and a blanket. He thought she was lonely. The galaxy knew she was the apex predator. Caden pushed off the pillar. The silence that fell over the hall as he walked toward her was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for bomb disposal units. He didn't notice. He was too busy dodging the trailing tail of a Naga diplomat. "Excuse me, pardon me, just trying to get to the lady in the intimidating dress." Isolde watched the small, soft creature approach. Her primary hearts were beating a slow, predatory rhythm. But her secondary hearts, the ones responsible for social signaling, were paralyzed. Why was he moving toward her? Xenobiology dictated that soft, unarmored things ran away from void weavers. It was the natural order. Yet here was this beige-skinned biped, sauntering through her fear aura as if it were nothing more than a mild draft. He stopped right in front of her. He came up to maybe her chest, requiring him to tilt his head back. "You look like you're having about as much fun as I am," Caden said, his voice dropping into that confidential, conspiratorial range humans used when complaining about the weather. "The canapes are rubber, right?" Isolde blinked. Her nictitating membranes flashed across her eyes, a biological sign of extreme confusion, usually followed by a plasma strike. But she didn't strike. She froze. Well, the culture shock was visceral. No one spoke to her. They petitioned her. They begged her. They did not complain about the texture of the appetizers. "I do not consume solid matter in public," she rasped. Her voice sounded like tectonic plates shifting, deep and resonant. "Smart move," Caden nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "I think the blue ones are actually packing foam. Look, I'm Caden. I'm mostly here to make sure the Terran ambassador doesn't try to pet the Krogans again." He extended a hand. Isolde stared at the appendage. It was small, devoid of claws, and terrifyingly fragile. If she took it, she might crush it. But the sheer audacity of the gesture, the baffling, ignorant charm of it, short-circuited her threat assessment protocols. This was the human bond in action, offering connection where logic demanded separation. For she hesitated, her obsidian fingers twitching. Then carefully, delicately, she reached out. When her chitinous palm met his skin, the sensation was electric. Not painful, but shocking. He was so warm, heat radiated from him, a byproduct of his high metabolism mammalian biology, and it seeped into her naturally cold extremities. It was intoxicating. Her internal cooling system stuttered. Isolde, she managed to say. Nice to meet you, Isolde. Caden smiled. It wasn't a baring of teeth for aggression. It was soft, crinkling the corners of his eyes. They're playing a waltz. Well, a waltz in 17/4 time, but close enough. Do you dance? Or are you strictly here to intimidate the buffet? The room held its breath. A collective gasp was trapped in 300 throats. He had just asked the Void Empress, the living singularity, how to waltz. Isolde looked down at him. She could feel the pulse in his wrist against her claws. Steady, calm, utterly unafraid. It was the most baffling thing she had ever encountered. Adaptation was the hallmark of her species, but she had no template for this. She started, her voice surprisingly small for a creature who could eat stars. I have never been asked. Well, Caden said, shifting his grip to gently guide her toward the empty floor, blissfully unaware that he was leading a weapon of mass destruction by the hand. First time for everything. Come on, I promise not to step on your talons. Pedipalps, she corrected, the word slipping out before she could stop it. Right, pedipalps. I'll be careful. As they stepped onto the floor, the crowd parted further, their terror now mixed with a profound existential confusion. But Caden didn't see the politics. He just felt the cold, trembling hand of someone who looked like they needed a friend, and he held on tighter. The music swelled, a discordant symphony of flutes and percussion that sounded uncomfortably like glass shattering in a tunnel. But Caden counted the beat. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He placed his right hand on her waist, or at least the chitinous ridge that he assumed served the same structural purpose. It was hard as diamond and cold enough to condense moisture from the air, leaving a faint mist swirling around their joined bodies. To the onlookers, it looked like a field mouse trying to lead a dragon. To Isolde, it felt like standing in the heart of a supernova. Every point of contact was a sensory overload. Her species communicated through thermal shifts and vibration, and this human was a furnace. His palm against hers was a constant, steady broadcast of biological warmth that bypassed her armor and went straight to her core. Her secondary hearts began to flutter, an involuntary syncopation that flushed her obsidian scales with a faint, bioluminescent violet. You're trembling, Caden murmured, leaning in slightly to be heard over the noise. Am I stepping on your feet? I told you I have no rhythm. No, Isolde answered, the word vibrating in his chest. It is the heat. You run very hot, Caden Voss. High metabolism comes with the anxiety. He spun her. It was a clumsy, loping turn, but she followed him with a grace that defied physics. For a moment, just a fleeting second, the terrifying empress of the Void Weavers wasn't a galactic superpower. She was just a dance partner trying not to trip. And it was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with shared survival. Then the illusion shattered. A frantic, strangled whisper hissed into Caden's hidden earpiece. It was his aide, Toby, whose voice was currently an octave higher than humanly possible. Caden, listen to me very carefully. Do not make sudden movements. Do not look surprised. That is not a diplomat. That is Isolde the Worldbreaker. She glassed the Proxima system last Tuesday. Put her down. Slowly, Caden missed a step. His boot came down hard on the polished floor, and he stiffened. The realization hit him like a freight train. The silence of the room, the terrified dignitaries, the sheer oppressive aura coming off the woman in his arms. He wasn't dancing with a lonely wallflower. He was slow dancing with a sentient nuclear weapon. Isolde felt the shift immediately. The warmth in his hand didn't fade, but the rhythm of his pulse spiked. She stopped moving, her violet bioluminescence dimming back to a defensive, abyssal black. You know, she stated. It wasn't a question. It was a resignation. She pulled back slightly, preparing to release his hand. This was the ritual. This was the moment the soft thing realized what it was holding and fled. The tragic biology of her existence was that to be known was to be feared. The human bond, she assumed, had a survival limit, and she had just exceeded it. I should return to my sector, she said, her voice dropping back to that tectonic rumble. This was an error. Caden looked at her. He looked at the terrifying geometry of her face, the eyes that held no light, and the claws that could slice through starship hulls. Then he looked at her hand, still lingering in his, hovering, waiting for him to let go. Protocol dictates fear. Logic demands retreat. But humans are famously bad at following instructions. He didn't let go. He tightened his grip. Hey, Caden said, his voice cracking just a little before he cleared his throat. We haven't finished the song. Isolde froze. The cooling fans in her neck frill whirred to life, a soft clicking sound of disbelief. I am the end of systems, she whispered, the threat lacking any real heat. I am the void. And I'm the guy who's going to look like an idiot if you leave me standing here alone. Caden countered, a nervous but genuine smile tugging at his mouth. Besides, Toby, my aide, says you glassed a system last Tuesday. That sounds stressful. You definitely need this dance more than I do. He tugged her gently. Not with force, but with an invitation. A request. The shock that rippled through Isolde was greater than any weapon impact. He knew. He understood the lethal potential of her biology, the weight of her history, and the vast, unbridgeable gap between their stations. And he decided it didn't matter. He prioritized the moment, the simple, baffling, beautiful act of swaying in a circle, over the instinct to survive. You are reckless, she said, but she stepped back into him. The violet light returned to her scales, brighter this time, pulsing in time with the music. I'm human, Caden shrugged, guiding her into a dip that made 3 ambassadors faint from sheer stress. We're an acquired taste. The song ended too soon. The silence that followed wasn't fearful anymore. It was stunned. Caden stepped back, bowing slightly, with his hand lingering on her talons for a second longer than necessary. Same time next gala? He asked. Isolde looked at him, really looked at him, cataloging the fragile, impossible bravery of the creature. Next gala, she agreed, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the Empress of the Void Weavers smiled. It was terrifying, all teeth and angles, but to Caden, it looked like a victory.